What's going on? Coming to you from my man cave. This is Amputee University. Welcome back. I felt motivated to do a segment today about a very special individual, the late great Jim MacLaren. How he was the motivation behind the Challenged Athletes Foundation. Now, this foundation, as many of you know, has become a very big thing. But initially, it was started for Jim MacLaren. And I want to get into my friendship with him, my relationship with him, and kind of explain why. I would love for everyone to understand why his story is so important, especially as it relates to the Challenged Athletes Foundation. I think it's wonderful that so many people benefit from that organization in a variety of ways. I mean, specifically with the athletics, right? But I really feel like anybody associated with that should understand the backstory and why the whole thing got started. And by understanding the backstory and the man for whom which this was started, to better understand him would lead to personal enlightenment. Now let me back up, because I'm going to start jumping all over the place, because this guy just did so much for me personally, mentally, philosophically, that I have to stay focused. It's very easy to get off track with this guy because he did so many great things. But let me start back in the beginning. Back in 1989, I was going to a camp called Camp Good Days and Special Times. It was a camp for children and family members who have been affected by cancer. If you listen to my story, you know I lost my leg to cancer when I was 9, turning 10 years old. But anyway, at this point I'm about 15, I believe, and I think the year was 1989 or 1990. I give or take a year. I know I'm within that ballpark. Jim MacLaren, was a world record holder in the Ironman Kona triathlon. If you know anything about triathlon, that's the big event once a year for the top triathletes in the world. And anyway, he's the world record holder for amputees. He's finishing top third of all people. He's just a phenomenal athlete. He decides to come down to the camp to visit the kids and visit, people. He just loves people. So he comes down, and I remember the timing was just uncanny, because I was at the beach. We were getting ready to do this thing called the flamingo dip. If you know what that is, you stand on one leg in the water, and you just try to see who can stand in the water the longest without falling over or giving up or losing your balance. As soon as you put your hand down or fall or give up, obviously you're done. So it was uncanny. He comes down, and this guy was 6'5", and he just has a presence. I mean, he's a very good-looking guy. He comes down, and he kind of introduces himself, and he wants to get right into this thing. Like, it's another way for him to compete, I suppose. Like, I think he was just really into trying this challenge. So me and him were the only two amputees in the water. So we're used to standing on one leg, and time goes on, 15-20 minutes. I would say after 20-25 minutes, everyone else dropped out or was disqualified. So it was down to me and Jim. And I have a picture of this. We're standing together. I'm standing behind him. And you can see how large this guy was. I'm about 5'5", he's 6'5", so he's just towering over me. But I will say I had the advantage of being behind him, so I could see what he was doing. He couldn't see me. So just mentally I was at an advantage, I suppose. But we were in the water for close to an hour. And finally, he gave up or let me win. I'm not sure which one. And I'll never know, because Jim is now gone. But that was the beginning of a very powerful friendship. Um, and truth be told, I think about this guy every day of my life. At some point in the day, I'll think about him. He had that much of an impact on me. But anyway, from that moment forward, after that flamingo dip, we talked, we chatted. He obviously, we felt a bond to one another instantly because of the circumstances. And, he gave me some information about prosthetics and what he was doing. And eventually he's also doing soap operas at this time. He was on Another World. And this is the kind of guy he was. He goes, listen, I'm going to give you my number to the studio at Another World. I want you to call me sometime. So he gives me the number. He does his rounds. He kind of sees the camp and meets people and goes on his way. And at some point, I can't quite recall, obviously I get a hold of him. We talk back and forth every once in a while, not a lot. I mean, he's a very, very busy guy, and I respect that. So, he goes on, and he's continuing to compete. He's still dominating the triathlons, especially in terms of being an amputee. And if you know the story, he's in a triathlon in California competing, and he's on the bike portion of the triathlon, and it's supposed to be a closed course, and this story is just so uncanny. He's flying on his bike, and if you know Jim, he's cranking. I couldn't even guess how fast he was going. But a police officer, for unknown reasons, I don't think to this day knows why, this police officer decided this van had time to cut through the circuit. And I believe no cars had any business crossing this road. But anyway, this police officer had this van cross the road, and Jim saw it. He couldn't do anything except try to click his pedal one step faster. He describes this. That's the only reason I can describe it. He decided he couldn't stop. The only hope he had was to speed up. So he tried to go faster to beat the van, and he gets clipped, and he goes headfirst into a signpost and breaks his neck. And from this point forward, he is told he's going to be a quadriplegic, and he describes it, he'll never heal from the neck down again, or the chest down again. And as time goes on, there's a lot to this story. I remember specifically when it happened. It was during the summer, and I was at camp again. This is probably, a year or two after I met him. And I remember the news. I mean, Gary Mervis, the founder of Camp Good Days, told everybody that Jim was in this horrible accident and broke his neck, and he was paralyzed, and it was just a horrible thing. I mean, I remember we made a card for him, and all the campers and everybody signed it. It was this big card, and I'm sure he kept it all those years too, because that's the kind of guy he was. But that first instinct was, this guy is so strong and so amazing. He's going to somehow come out of this, and to some degree he did. He did far more than anybody thought in terms of recovery. He got partial movement of his arms and legs back. He could stand, he could walk in the water and things like that. But he was in chronic pain all the time, and just getting ready in the morning was, a 3 or 4 hour process. I just can't imagine how difficult that was. But there's a lot to this story, but ultimately Jim needs a wheelchair, and Jim needs a van so he can be more independent in terms of driving himself places and not depending on other people. And if you know Jim, he would never want to be dependent on other people unless he had to be. So his friends from the triathlon community did this big fundraiser, and that following summer, I believe, and I believe it was at the Kona event, they presented him with the van and the new wheelchair so he could be completely independent of caretakers, I suppose, to some degree. I think he always needed somebody here and there, but at least he could go get a cup of coffee or run errands and be independent doing those things. So that moment in time, that was the beginning of the Challenge Athletes Foundation. And it's amazing to think, because I remember how this all unfolded, how big it is now. Like, I follow them on Instagram and I see how big it is. And it's just incredible. I mean, I'm going to do another segment today, I think, on the whole premise or concept of things happen for a reason. And I'm going to call this piece part 1. Part 2 is going to be the concept of things happen for a reason. And I'm a little frustrated because I recently saw somebody ranking cliches, and this is the one that this person really didn't like. Things happen for a reason. They wanted to burn it. And I kind of resent that, because Jim believed that these accidents were a gift. And as time went on, proof is in the pudding, right? So at first, when he said, this is a gift, things happen for a reason, initially, early on, after that second accident, I'm like, this is crazy. No one should have to endure 2 accidents. So Jim lost his leg in a motorcycle accident, got hit by a bus. Then he has a second accident where he becomes paralyzed. And I'm thinking, this is the most blessed guy I know, and the most unfortunate, because no one should have to endure these 2 accidents. But he always had the belief that somehow this was going to lead him to a higher level of enlightenment, which I'm sure it did. I know it did. And it was also going to lead to great gifts. And he truly believed that. I'm not sure how many people around him believed that, but he believed that. And as time went on, it was proven. And I'm going to get into that in part 2. So part 1, this segment, I'm just impromptu putting this all together in my brain right now. I covered how I met Jim MacLaren, a little bit about our friendship, and how his second accident led to the founding of the Challenge Athletes Foundation. And I encourage anybody who follows Challenge Athletes Foundation to just YouTube, humor me and YouTube Jim MacLaren, and watch some of his videos and understand how this whole thing got started. I promise you it's going to change your life. I promise you it's going to change how you view the world. And I think it's also going to encourage everybody to give back. So, I think that's what Jim would want. And I think, one of my fears is, over time, the story of Jim MacLaren is going to fade a little bit, as legendary as he is, and people are going to forget the story. But the story, I think, is critical to moving that foundation forward. I think it's critical to him to understand it and incorporate that into your life. So please check him out, understand how Challenge Athletes was founded, and, of course, try to do your part to, I guess, be thankful in a sense, but also contribute to humanity like Jim did. Thank you. Be well.